where you're working now?
I'm Laura Saarikoski from Finland, and I was the Reuters Fellow here in 2011 to 2012. I'm now the US Correspondent for the leading Finnish newspaper Helsingin Sanomat, and I've been based in Washington, D.C. for 4 years.
So we were talking this morning in the sessions here at the 35th anniversary about your experience of how reporting in America has changed. In particular, you're talking about echo chambers and reporting from perhaps the central urban areas and how there's differences in perceptions when you go out into across America. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I got to the United States 4 years ago, I was really shocked how the country had changed in 20 years. I was based in DC also in the late 1990s. And at the time, of course, there was a lot of sort of fringe groups with conspiracy theories. There were the Rush Limbaugh listeners that were thinking that the Clintons had murdered people or committed these high crimes, but that was at the time sort of a marginal thinking. Now, before Trump's election, when I was traveling a lot in the Midwest, I came across all these lovely, normal people, nurses and teachers and clerks, who told me how Hillary Clinton has murdered between 9 to 48 people, and they really believed in it. And that really shocked me because I realized that conspiracy theories have become mainstream. And I am very worried about the huge divide in the United States now between the right and left, and how journalism actually increases the divide and doesn't help to bridge it. And that, I think, will lead to a very, very dangerous situation, and has already led to a very dangerous situation where the opposite side is not seen as somebody who disagrees with you, but who's also the enemy.
So you say journalism has contributed to this situation. How could you describe that?
Well, first of all, of course, sort of social media echo chambers and how we sort of see the news that we like and our friends like, and that sort of reinforces the convictions that we already have and doesn't help us to understand the other side. But then it's also about money. In the US, the so-called legacy media, I subscribe to Wall Street Journal and Washington Post and New York Times, they are very, very expensive papers. I mean, I pay about $500, $600 a year for that. So that means that people without means don't have access to that kind of an information. And I met a lot of people, like at the Trump rally last week, I met a lady who says, I only get my news from YouTube now. And then she started telling me how actually, Clintons are, Obamas are all, part of this huge conspiracy that is about to do away with American people. And that is shocking. So my concern is, how would these journalists who work for New York Times, for example, how do they help to their readers to sort of understand the other side and the way the other side is thinking, and not sort of increase the idea that, for example, all the white, uneducated lower class and their concerns are somehow to be dismissed because these people are considered to be racist. And I think it's been a little bit easier for me as a Scandinavian journalist to sort of go to the Midwest and go to Detroit and talk to the auto workers or the people who have lost their jobs, because in Scandinavia we maybe have a little bit of more empathy to poor people, whereas in the United States especially, many of the fabulous journalists are the product of the best schools in the United States, just like here in Britain, the product of Oxford or Cambridge and so forth. So they are brilliant, but they don't necessarily know how the other half lives.
So
and sometimes they might not even care that much because their readership are not those people.
So do you think they write them off as Trump supporters, therefore they're not worth talking to? Even though when Trump was elected, people said the reason he was elected is because we weren't talking to them. Do you think it hasn't changed since his election?
I think there is a lot of brilliant reporting about the Trump supporters, so I'm not saying that it's black and white, but I do say that there is an attitude in the liberal media in the US to be naturally more empathetic to the minorities than to the uneducated white people in the Midwest. And that is because those people sometimes hold these views that are horrible. I mean, some of them are racist, some of them are really like a half fascist who think that, US Constitution doesn't really matter, that Trump should be able to do whatever he pleases. So I think it's important for journalists to sort of separate between, you have to understand the Trump supporters, you have to understand the other side. It doesn't mean that you have to accept their opinions, but if you don't understand and emphasize with these people, you're never going to understand where Trump support comes from. And that is something that all us journalists need to pay more attention to.
That's great. And this resonates with something Alan Rusbridger said yesterday in his talk about the growing elitism of news, when news is behind paywalls and everyone else just has to make do with what's out there on the internet, whatever rubbish it is.
Yeah, I think he had a very powerful example about a fake news that was spreading in Sweden. I can't remember, it was about immigration crime or something like that, and how Dagens Nyheter, which is one of the leading Swedish dailies, had done an excellent reporting, sort of analyzing and fact-finding and finding out that the whole fake news didn't exist. But that news was behind a paywall. So all those people who wanted to find out about it never heard the correcting story. They could only access the fake news because that was free. And that is very much what happens also in the United States.